My friends, there's a chant now echoing through the streets of the West, not just in the Middle East, not just in Gaza, but in New York, London, Paris, Los Angeles, Berlin. A cry rising up not only from terrorist cells, but from college campuses, influencers, and political figures. In the modern world, the name Hamas is often treated as a political label, associated with headlines, debates, and international conflict. But its origin is far deeper, more ancient, and more spiritually charged than the world recognizes. The first time we see the word Hamas is not in a political document, but in the pages of the Bible. In Hebrew, the word Hamas means violence, lawlessness, cruelty, and injustice. It appears in the book of Genesis, where it is used to describe the condition of the earth before the flood. Genesis 6:11 declares, "Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence," Hamas. This was not ordinary violence, it was a systemic corruption, a worldwide moral collapse that grieved the heart of God. The result of this Hamas was the judgment of the flood, an act of divine justice to cleanse the earth from its moral rot. The world today chants the name of this same word with passion, waving flags and raising fists, many unknowingly invoking an ancient force. The repetition of "We are Hamas" is more than a political alliance. It is a spiritual confession. It is a declaration of alignment, not just with a militant group, but with a spirit that has existed since the beginning. This spirit of Hamas has taken many forms throughout history. It is the spirit that moved Cain to slay his brother Abel. It rose in Pharaoh as he enslaved God's people. It moved through Haman in the courts of Persia as he plotted the annihilation of the Jews. It cloaked itself in the darkness of Nazism in the 20th century, and it has now found a banner and a name in the present-day Hamas. To declare "We are Hamas" is to declare, knowingly or not, we are violence, we are destruction, we are cruelty. It is to identify with the very attributes God condemns and judges. And yet, across the Western world, on university campuses, in protests, and on social media, people chant those words as if they were noble, as if they stood for freedom, for the oppressed, for justice. But true justice does not rape, burn, decapitate, or murder children. True justice does not use human shields, hide behind hospitals, or glorify death. That is not justice. It is Hamas. In the ancient Hebrew, words carry weight beyond definition. They are revelations of nature and character. Hamas is not simply something people do, it is something people become. When violence fills the heart, when cruelty becomes virtue, when lawlessness is cheered in the name of liberation, a transformation occurs. Individuals, movements, even nations can become Hamas, and when they do, judgment is never far behind. That is what the Genesis account reveals. Not only what was, but what will be again when the earth fills with Hamas once more. So, when a society begins to embrace that word, when it begins to wear it as a badge of honor, we are witnessing not merely a political movement, but a spiritual collapse. We are watching the lines between good and evil blur. And the tragedy is not only that people chant for Hamas, but that they have no idea what they are truly chanting for. They think they are standing for the oppressed, but they are aligning with oppressors. They believe they are resisting tyranny, but they are embracing it. They believe they are on the right side of history, yet they stand on the side of those who embody the very definition of biblical violence. The cry of "We are Hamas" is the echo of an ancient spirit that warred against the people of God, against righteousness, against truth. It is the same spirit that has always sought to destroy the covenant, the promise, and the seed of Abraham. Across the globe, in places far removed from the battlefields of Gaza and Israel, a cry is rising, "We are Hamas." It's chanted in college protests, displayed on signs in urban demonstrations, echoed in media soundbites, and repeated in online campaigns. But the significance of that chant reaches far beyond a moment of political activism. This cry is not just a slogan, it is an alignment. It is a spiritual statement whether those saying it realize it or not. When individuals declare "We are Hamas," they are not simply aligning with a political group. They are aligning with a deeper spirit, one that transcends borders and parties. They are binding themselves, knowingly or unknowingly, to a force that is ancient, dark, and rooted in a war that has been raging since the beginning of time. In the spiritual realm, words carry weight. To speak is to declare, to chant is to proclaim allegiance, and the moment those three words leave a person's mouth, they become more than just sounds, they become an invocation. When someone declares, "We are Hamas," they are not simply expressing sympathy for Palestinians. They are, whether in ignorance or intent, aligning with a movement whose name in Hebrew means violence, whose history is marked by terror, and whose purpose is rooted in destruction. They are joining a chorus of hatred that calls for the eradication of Israel, the extermination of Jews, and the dismantling of every value that undergirds civilization and morality. It is one thing to weep for the innocent. It is another thing to exalt those who shed innocent blood. It is one thing to care for suffering. It is another to become the voice of those who glorify suffering. Hamas does not merely fight political battles. It kidnaps, tortures, rapes, and murders. It hides behind women and children. It fires rockets from schools and mosques. It celebrates death. To chant "We are Hamas" is to chant in the spirit of death. It is to declare fellowship with lawlessness. It is to enter into communion with cruelty. This is not limited to one region. The cry is now being shouted in cities built on the foundation of Western ideals. In New York, in London, in Sydney and Toronto, the streets echo with this dark slogan, and with each echo a veil is being lifted. What once hid in darkness now walks in daylight. What once whispered in secret now shouts on rooftops. There is a revealing taking place. The masks are coming off. The true hearts of men are being exposed. This is more than political confusion. It is spiritual delusion. It is the blindness spoken of in the scriptures, where those who reject the truth are handed over to deception. And the deception is so deep that even those who would never condone terrorism now find themselves marching beside those who do. Professors justify it in the name of decolonization. Celebrities repost it under the guise of human rights. Students defend it, believing they are standing for justice, but they do not see the spirit behind the slogan. They do not recognize that they are being swept into a current that leads not to liberation, but to destruction. They do not understand that the words they chant are not their own. They are echoes of an ancient hatred that has resurfaced in modern form. The spirit behind Hamas is not new. It has worn many names: Amalek, Haman, Antiochus, Rome, Nazi. Each time it rises, it takes on a new mask, but the goal is always the same: to destroy the covenant, to erase the witness of God, to wipe out the chosen people, and to silence the voice of truth. Now that same spirit walks boldly through the streets of the free world, carried by voices that have no idea what they are invoking. It has crept into institutions, media, academia, and even houses of worship. The cry of "We are Hamas" is more than political. It is a spiritual alignment, and the consequences of that alignment are grave. The war we are witnessing today is not new. It did not begin on October 7th, nor in the formation of Hamas, nor even with the birth of modern Israel. This war is ancient. It is the same war that began with the shedding of innocent blood when Cain rose against his brother Abel. It is the same war that raged when Pharaoh enslaved the Hebrews and sought to crush the people of the covenant. It continued with Haman in ancient Persia, who devised a plot to annihilate the Jewish people from the face of the earth. That same hatred, that same spirit, has resurfaced time and time again, through Rome, through pogroms, through the Holocaust, and now through Hamas. What we are witnessing today is the resurfacing of an old hatred in a new form, an ancient spiritual battle now wrapped in modern language and political dressing. The names change, the faces shift, the weapons modernize, but the target remains the same: the people of God, the covenant of God, and the purposes of God on earth. It is no coincidence that Israel, a sliver of land surrounded by enemies, remains at the center of global controversy. It is no accident that tiny Israel, a democratic state, is demonized while terror regimes are defended. This is not logic, it is prophecy. This is not politics, it is spiritual war. The powers of darkness have always sought to wipe out what God has chosen. From Egypt to Babylon, from Auschwitz to Hamas, the war is the same. It is a war against the covenant, against the promises spoken to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And this is what the world does not understand when it repeats slogans and chants slogans like "We are HAMAS." They are entering an ancient war without knowing its origin or end. They are placing themselves on the wrong side of a battle that has raged for thousands of years. When they align themselves with HAMAS, they are aligning themselves with the spiritual descendants of those who slaughtered children, burned synagogues, and tore down temples. This is not resistance, it is repetition. It is the same darkness, the same hatred, the same enmity with God cloaked in the language of liberation and justice. In Genesis, the serpent strikes at the seed, and throughout history, that serpent has never stopped striking. But behind the attacks is always a fear, because the seed is appointed to crush the head of the serpent, and so the enemy rages again and again against the nation through which the promise was given, against the people through whom the Messiah came. This rage, this fury, this obsession with the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people, it is not rational because it is not human, it is spiritual, and it is older than nations. Those who cry out for the destruction of Israel do not realize that they are participating in something far beyond themselves. They are lending their voices to a battle they do not comprehend, stirred by a hatred that has been passed down through the ages. But this is how spiritual war manifests, in words, in chants, in alliances. The war from Genesis is still unfolding, now seen in protests, in resolutions, in international condemnations, in rockets, and in martyrdom. It is not that the modern world has discovered a new cause. It is that the ancient hatred has found a new generation to inhabit. This is why the war is not only about land, it never was. It is not about borders. It is about promises. It is about the word of God. And those who war against the people of God are, whether they know it or not, warring against God himself. The ancient war has never ended. It has only changed forms. And now it rages once more, from Genesis to Gaza, with a vengeance that is as old as Eden. In an age when words are manipulated and truth is twisted, the concept of justice has been hijacked and repurposed to justify the very evils it once stood against. We are witnessing a generation that has been trained to believe that if something is labeled as liberation, then it must be righteous. If it is called resistance, then it must be moral. And if it claims to speak for the oppressed, then it must speak truth. But the deception lies in the labels. What is cloaked in the garments of justice may be nothing more than evil parading as light. The chants for HAMAS, the glorification of terror, the justifications for brutality, all reveal a dangerous trend, the use of justice as a tool to defend what is utterly unjust. Those who raise their fists and cry out for HAMAS or chant slogans celebrating violent resistance have convinced themselves that they are standing for the oppressed. But true justice is not defined by rage. It is not driven by revenge, and it cannot be built upon lies. Justice without truth is not justice at all. It becomes tyranny. When students protest in the name of justice but celebrate beheadings and kidnappings, when institutions honor the voices of those who call for genocide, when media outlets turn murderers into martyrs and victims into villains, then justice has been corrupted, inverted, and weaponized. There is a blindness that comes when a culture turns from God. That blindness leads to a reversal of all that is right. Isaiah spoke of it when he warned, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil." That is precisely what is happening in our generation. The very ones who champion inclusion turn around and chant for the death of a people. The very ones who advocate for human rights remain silent when those rights are stripped from Israeli women and children. The very ones who preach about oppression praise regimes that imprison, torture, and kill their own citizens. This is not compassion. This is confusion, and it is spiritual in nature. Evil always seeks to disguise itself. It never comes with horns and a pitchfork. It comes dressed in causes. It comes under the banners of justice, liberation, and equality, but it carries knives and rockets. It carries hatred in its heart and deception on its tongue. And the tragedy of this hour is that many have fallen for the disguise. Many have mistaken the destroyer for the deliverer. They have taken the words of terrorists and repeated them as gospel. They have turned their backs on the innocent and embraced the hands of murderers. When Hamas fires missiles at civilian homes, they do not do it for freedom. They do it to destroy. When they tunnel under kindergartens, they are not seeking justice. They are seeking death. And yet, in the halls of academia and the chambers of governments, these acts are excused, even praised. This reveals not only the corruption of justice, but the spiritual deception that has overtaken modern culture. When a society can no longer tell the difference between good and evil, it is already under judgment. True justice cannot be separated from truth, and truth cannot be redefined to suit a narrative. Truth is not subjective. It does not bow to ideology. It does not change with trends or politics. It remains firm even when the world shouts against it. To stand for true justice is to stand against Hamas. It is to stand against the slaughter of the innocent. It is to reject the glorification of terror. It is to weep for all who suffer while refusing to excuse the cause of their suffering. The deception that cloaks itself in justice is not new. It is the same deception that justified Pharaoh's oppression, that rationalized Haman's plot, that sanctified Rome's persecution, that fueled the Nazi machine. Each time evil wore the mask of morality, and each time it was the discerning, those who feared God more than man, who saw through the mask and refused to bow. The age we are living in is not simply marked by confusion. It is marked by apostasy. A great falling away is unfolding before our very eyes, not just in the secular world, but within the very places that once stood as beacons of truth. Institutions that once upheld moral clarity now glorify perversion. Churches that once proclaimed the word of God now bow to the idols of culture. Leaders that once defended righteousness now cower before the mob. This is the fruit of a civilization that has turned its back on God, where truth is no longer fixed, where morality is fluid, and where evil is not just tolerated but celebrated. It is not just a cultural shift, it is spiritual rebellion, the abandonment of the very foundations that once upheld the West. Apostasy does not always come in the form of open defiance. Often it comes subtly, wrapped in tolerance, cloaked in compassion, and justified by relevance. But at its root, it is the same, a rejection of God's authority, a dismissal of His word, and an embrace of darkness disguised as light. We are watching people not only fall into sin, but defend it, promote it, and teach it as virtue. We are witnessing the inversion of holiness. That which was once shameful is now celebrated, and that which was once sacred is now ridiculed. The prophets spoke of this day when truth would be cast down in the streets and righteousness would no longer enter. And yet the deception goes deeper still. The falling away is not only among individuals, it is systemic. It has entered into the bloodstream of governments, universities, media, and even ministries. We are seeing nations that were once built upon biblical principles now legislate against those very truths. We are seeing schools that were once founded in the fear of God now promote ideologies that are hostile to His ways. We are seeing pastors and Christian leaders who once boldly preached repentance now remain silent in the face of evil, fearing offense more than they fear God. This is not just compromise, it is apostasy. And it is one of the clearest signs of the times. The endorsement of movements like Hamas by those in the West is not merely political blindness. It is spiritual blindness born of apostasy. When people who claim to stand for human rights defend regimes that crush freedom, when voices that once defended the persecuted now support the persecutors, when Christians remain silent in the face of mass murder, something far more dangerous than political confusion is at work. It is the spirit of delusion, the same delusion that the scriptures say will come upon those who reject the truth. They will believe the lie, and in believing the lie, they will join in its destruction. Apostasy always comes with consequences. It is not merely a theological problem, it is a moral and societal collapse. When truth is rejected, law follows. When God is removed, justice crumbles. When righteousness is despised, chaos fills the vacuum. The voices that shout for Hamas today, that chant slogans soaked in hatred, that call for the annihilation of a people, are not voices of progress. They are voices of apostasy, and they are being cheered on by a generation that no longer knows the difference between holiness and profanity, between love and hatred, between light and darkness. What we are seeing is not just hatred for Israel, it is hatred for God. The spirit that rages against the people of the covenant is the same spirit that rages against the author of the covenant. Those who join in that hatred are not just standing against a nation, they are standing against the God who chose that nation, who preserved it through centuries of exile and persecution, and who brought it back in fulfillment of his word. Apostasy always leads to alignment with darkness, and that alignment is now being proclaimed from the pulpits of false churches, the halls of academia, and the seats of government. There is a line being drawn in this hour, a dividing line between light and darkness, truth and deception, God and the gods of this age. That line is no longer subtle. It is bold, visible, and unavoidable. What once remained hidden in the shadows is now openly declared. What once whispered in secrecy now shouts from the rooftops. The cry, "We are HAMAS," is not merely a slogan of political allegiance. It is a revelation of where a person or a society stands in the great cosmic war. There are no neutral grounds in this battle. Silence is no refuge, and indecision is itself a decision. The war has come to the gates of every institution, every city, every nation, and every heart, and each must choose on which side of the line they will stand. The spirit behind Hamas is a spirit of destruction, of lawlessness, of Antichrist. It is the same spirit that has risen in every age to oppose the purposes of God, to silence the witness of truth, to erase the covenant, and to desecrate the sacred. This spirit does not just want land, it wants dominion. It does not seek peace, it seeks submission, and wherever it goes, it demands that every voice either bow or be broken. That is why the cry, "We are HAMAS," is so dangerous. It is not simply an expression of opinion, it is an invitation to surrender to that spirit. And those who echo that cry, whether out of ignorance or malice, are crossing the line into alignment with something far more sinister than they realize. We are watching the nations gather. We are watching the separation that must come before judgment. The prophets spoke of this hour when the nations would rage, when Jerusalem would become a cup of trembling, when men would call evil good and good evil. We are living in the fulfillment of prophecy, and with every protest, with every chant, with every policy, the separation becomes clearer. There is no hiding in this hour. The darkness is becoming bolder, but so must the light. The hatred is growing louder, but so must the truth. The time for lukewarm faith, for compromised conviction, for silent agreement with evil is over. The cry of "We are HAMAS" is a test, a spiritual test. It exposes hearts, unmasks ideologies, and brings hidden allegiances into the open. It forces a confrontation not only with geopolitics, but with eternity. Those who align themselves with a spirit of destruction align themselves against the God of life. Those who lift their voices in praise of terror lift their voices against the one who formed every human life in his image. There is no version of justice that can include the celebration of murder. There is no version of righteousness that can include the glorification of those who burn, slaughter, and desecrate, And while the world becomes more blind, more hostile, and more divided, there remains a remnant, those who will not bow. Those who see through the slogans, those who discern the spirit behind the chant, those who understand that to stand with truth is to stand with Israel, not because it is perfect, but because it was chosen. To stand with life, to stand against the ancient hatred that has risen again in a new mask, to refuse to be swept into the delusion of the age, to speak when the world commands silence, to shine when the night demands darkness. There is a cost to standing on this side of the line, but the cost of crossing it is far greater. The time has come to draw that line in our own lives, to decide whether we will be shaped by the noise of culture or the voice of heaven, whether we will echo the slogans of this age or proclaim the truth that does not change. The line has been drawn in blood, the blood of covenant, the blood of the prophets, the blood of Messiah, and all must choose. So now the line has been drawn. The darkness is no longer hidden. It is marching in the open, parading as justice, shouting through protests, chanting death while claiming virtue, and the world follows blindly, willingly, tragically. But in an age where the line between good and evil is being erased, the call of God is to stand clearer, louder, and firmer than ever before. You were not born for comfort, you were born for conflict. You were not placed in this hour by accident. He appointed you to stand in the fire and not be consumed. To align with truth is to become a sign of contradiction in a world that worships the lie. To stand for Israel, to speak for life, to declare righteousness in the face of rage. This is not extremism, it is obedience. And while the world chants, "We are HAMAS," we must rise and declare, "We are not of this world. We are of the kingdom that cannot be shaken. We are of the light that no darkness can overcome. We are of the covenant sealed not in slogans, but in the blood of the Lamb. Do not be silent. Do not retreat. Do not be swept away by the delusion, for this is not just a cultural moment. It is a prophetic hour. Choose this day whom you will serve, and once you have chosen, stand, unshaken, unafraid, and unashamed. The war is ancient, the stakes are eternal, and the victory belongs to those who stand with God, with truth, and with the purposes that will not fail.